So, all right. We're back with Srimad Bhagavatam. We're late a little bit today, so sorry about that. For those of you who are really into being on time, it's okay. We had our Sunday program yesterday, and everyone, I know I get all out of sorts after such an event. So maybe we all did a little bit. So anyway, we are going to do our prayers to the gurus. We're going to try and invoke the mercy of not only the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but our Guru Parampara, so that we actually can try and take in this knowledge, without their mercy. And even I'm only reading things from their own revelations and sharing and works. So let's pray for their mercy. So Piyush, or Krishi, I'll give it to you there. Oh, let's see. We'll do that one after.
चक्षुर्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा मह्यं ददाति स्वयं पदान्तिकां। श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपां साग्रजतां सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवनं साद्वैतं साधुतां परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेवां श्रीराधा कृष्णपदान् सगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपीशा गोपिका कान्ता राधाकान्ता नमोऽस्तुते। तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। पञ्चकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृन्द। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। कृष्णपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिने नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पश्चादेशतारिणे नमस्ते नमः भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Nar Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author Srimad Bhagavatam. Vatam Swakata Krishna Mohana Shravana Kirtana Hidayantastho Eva Brahmani Vidunoti Suvirit Satam.
Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is Paramatma in everyone's heart and benefactor of truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of devotee who has developed the urge to hear his message, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. This comes from Bhagavatam 1-17.
नाष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भगवत सेवया भागवते उत्तमा श्लोके भक्तिर्भावति नैष्टिकी. By regular attendance in classes
of Bhagavatam and rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact.
Jai.
Jai.
So we are back
On verse 30.
on verse 30. We are
Almost done with the chapter.
trying to hear the message of Godhead so that our material enjoyment will gradually subside, our desire for material enjoyment, and ultimately our real enjoyment, or eternal enjoyment, which could be loving service unto the Supreme Lord, will arise. But this is done by Srinvatam, by regular hearing. We have to hear the message of Godhead. So that's why we're here in the morning, to actually hear the message of Sri Krishna. And then also actually sharing kirtan. By Shravan and Kirtan, then we can actually achieve Smaran, actually memory of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, actually to be conscious of Krishna. We're practicing Krishna consciousness. So without these two very important things, Shravan, which is first hearing, and then Kirtan, sharing, memory, remembrance, Smarana will not take place, which is very important. It's actually the ultimate goal, is that we can always remember Krishna. Always think of him and never forget him. This is Krishna consciousness, actually. We're practicing like this. We are on yesterday. Just to recap what we read. It was in the revealed scriptures. The ultimate object. Remember, it was that Vasudeva para Veda, Vasudeva para Makaha, Vasudeva para Yoga, Vasudeva para Kriya, and Vasudeva param Jnanam, Vasudeva param Tapaha, Vasudeva paro Dharmo, Vasudeva para Gati. And it was all about everything that you do in the revealed scriptures. The ultimate object of knowledge is Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. The purpose of sacrifice is to please him. Yoga is for realizing him. All fruitive activities or karma is ultimately rewarded by him. He is supreme knowledge, in all severe austerity to perform to know him. All religion, dharma, is rendering loving service unto him. He is the supreme goal of life. So anything that you're looking for out of life, he's ultimately the source of that thing. So we think that we should focus on anything else, but really, if we focus him, all of the results of all those things are bestowed by him. So it's recommended. It's actually going to be soon. It's going to recommend. It might be in the next chapter, but there's a verse that no matter what the living entity wants, whether it's money, whether it's sense enjoyment, whether it's liberation, or whether it's pure devotional service, Krishna's the best guy to get it. He's the one who'll bestow it, and he's the one who'll give it. So any intelligent person offers their worship unto Krishna. Their time and energy will go unto Krishna because he's the one who's giving that thing anyway. So you don't need to make separate endeavors. You don't need to, because he's the end goal of everything that you would do anyway. So might as well water the root of the plant, and all the leaves and branches will get nourished. That means your career will be nourished, your wife will be nourished, your family life will be nourished, your relationships will be nourished. All of that will be taken care of. you have no worries. You don't have to do anything separate, actually. But, yeah, we're not conditioned that way. We're conditioned to pursue our material desires, and by doing that, we just cause ourselves misery. It's us. We're the ones making ourselves miserable. It's not, oh, it's just the material world, it's just Krishna, or it's just it's just how life goes, or it's this person's fault, or I can't believe he did this to me, or now the market's gonna crash, and it's not an outside thing. It's an internal thing. We're causing our own suffering. So this is the way to one, overcome suffering. Remember, it said earlier what ultimately this will rise a Shuddha Sattvic state in which the modes of passion and ignorance will be completely destroyed, and things like lamentation, greed, lust, ignorance, they'll actually go away by this practice of bhakti, pure bhakti. So we're interested in this. Everyone's interested in this. You should be. Anyone intelligent will be interested in the pure bliss and joy that comes in bhakti. And then especially so, at the very least, you'll be removed of all suffering with such a practice. But are we doing it, Like, I appreciate, I think you said something nice yesterday. We were talking about, oh, this person's a devotee or that person's a devotee, and then I think you like reflected on it for a moment, and you're like, actually, I'm trying to be an aspiring devotee, or I'm aspiring to be a devotee. And that's actually proper understanding, because if we were fully actually, we were talking about devotees that smoke marijuana, and I was just kind of quipping. There are no devotees that smoke marijuana, except maybe Lord Shiva. But this isn't the activity of somebody who's really immersed in devotional practice and bhakti. This might be the activity of someone who might aspire to practice bhakti. But actually there's a lot of activities that we do that those on the devotional path are not doing. So we should aspire for this being a devotee, an actual devotee of the Lord. So like that. But even a devotee will never feel like they're a devotee. So it's kind of, in Krishna's eyes, so many are devotees. But in the devotee's eyes, we're never qualified to be a devotee. So it's like kind of this funny paradox. So anyway, let's continue on with the reading. We're on text 30. Sa evedam sasarjagre Bhagavanatma mayaya Sadasadrupaya chaso Gunamaya guno vibhu Saha, that Eva, certainly, idam, this, sasarja, created, agre, before, Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, Atmamayaya, by his personal potency, Sat, the cause, Asat, the effect, Rupaya, by forms, Cha, and, Aso, the same Lord, Gunamaya, in the modes of material nature, Agunaha, transcendental, Vibhuhu, the absolute. Okay, translation. In the beginning of material creation, that absolute personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, in his transcendental position, created the energies of cause and effect by his own internal energy. So now he's continuing on with the glorification of Vasudeva, and why all activities should be unto Vasudeva. Because remember, they were asking for the essence of life. What is the very essence that one should do in life? And his answer immediately was that supreme occupation, which, I'll just read it, it's text 6 of this verse. Of this chapter. The supreme occupation for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord, Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So he's talking about our supreme occupation. And now he's really, now we're at the end of the chapter, he's really elaborating on it. And he's talking about the glories of Vasudeva. And he created the energies of cause and effect by his own internal energy. And Prabhupada says, the position of the Lord is always transcendental because the causal and effectual energies required for the creation of the material world were also created by him. He is unaffected, therefore, by the qualities of the material modes. I think the word was agunaha, without material qualities. His existence, form, activities, and paraphernalia all existed before the material creation. He is all spiritual and has nothing to do with the qualities of the material world, which are qualitatively distinct from the spiritual qualities of the Lord. So this is actually a verse that's one describing the position of Vasudeva, the Supreme Lord, but also describing the position of the material world. It has to come into a cause, and the effect is there, and then at some point it'll go to a destruction, and it'll go cause, effect, destruction again. Like this, creation, maintenance, and destruction. But actually, who's the creator of this system? It's actually explained in the Bhagavatam that Vishnu, from Vishnu, the original Brahma, the original creator, was manifested. So, and Brahma, in turn, then created all of creation that you know. And it's being maintained by Vishnu as well, through the Super Soul, the Kshirodakshay Vishnu. This will actually all be explained not too far from here. We'll get into this explanation soon. But we should understand, well, not too soon, but soon. We should understand that beyond all of the cause and effects of this world is the transcendent Lord who's sitting beyond all this. And actually, if we are interested in getting out of the because the cause and effects of this world cause us many sufferings, birth, death, disease, old age. It's not ideal. It's not ideal. There's no real happiness in, actually, Krishna calls this type of word what in the Bhagavad Gita? What word does he use? In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna calls this material world something. Yes, Dukhalaya, a place.
What do you know ashashwata?
It's nothing is permanent.
Shashwat nahi. Okay.
Yeah.
Shashwat is permanent. Ashashwat.
Yeah, a non-permanent place of miseries. So this is what this material world is. But he's sitting beyond it, and he is willing to take you beyond it, lest if you desire and realize the error of the ways of trying to be the master and controller and enjoyer of this material world, which is all of our plight. We have this tendency in ignorance to want to be gods. So Krishna gives us a world where we could be little gods of a certain portion of our life. And in that, though, we have to suffer the consequences. And that's the material, that's the Dukhalaya Shashvatam. You know, this temporary world of miseries. So this is our plight. But he's beyond all this, beyond all the cause and effect. So it's describing that. We'll continue. Taya vilasiteshveshu guneshu gunavaniva anta pravishta abhati vijnanena vidrimbitaha taya, by them, vilasiteshu, although in the function, eshu, these, Guneshu, the modes of material nature. Gunavan, affected by the modes. Eva, as if. Antaha, within. Pravishtaha, entered into. Abhati, appears to be. Vijnanena, by transcendental consciousness. Vidrimbitaha, fully enlightened. Translation. After creating the material substance, the Lord Vasudeva expands himself and enters into it. And although he is within the material modes of nature and appears to be one of the created beings, he is always fully enlightened in his transcendental position. Purport. The living entities are separated parts and parcels of the Lord, and the conditioned living entities who are unfit for the spiritual kingdom, unfortunately that's us, are strewn into the material world to enjoy matter to the fullest extent. I'm going to just Google the word strewn. I think it means like thrown into the material world. Strewn definition. To spread as seeds by scattering. So kind of we're like scattered seeds here in the material world. To enjoy matter to the fullest extent. As Paramatma and eternal friend of the living entities, the Lord, by one of his plenary portions, or absolute portions, accompanies the living entities to guide them in their material enjoyment and to become witness to all activities. While the living entities enjoy the material conditions, the Lord maintains his transcendental position without being affected by the material atmosphere. In the Vedic literature, Shruti, it is said that there are two birds in one tree. The Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.1 will say, Dvasu Parnasa Yujasa Kaya Samanam Briksham Parishashvajate Tayoranya Pipalam Svadvati Nashnananyo Bichakashiti. One of them is eating the fruit of the tree, while the other is witnessing the actions. The witness is the Lord, and the fruit eater is the living entity. The fruit eater, the living entity, has forgotten his real identity and is overwhelmed in the fruitive activities of the material conditions. But the Lord, the Paramatma, is always full in transcendental knowledge. That is the difference between the supersoul and the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul, the living entity, is controlled by the laws of nature, while the Paramatma, or the supersoul, is the controller of the material energy. So this is kind of describing, after creating the material substance, Lord Vasudeva expands himself and enters into it. And he, what is that position? It's called the what?
It's the
What expansion of Vishnu?
So which enters the creation?
Yes.
It's Garbhodaksha Vishnu.
No, Garbhodaksha Vishnu, he manifests the creation. There's the total material creation.
There is Mahavishnu, from whom from his course all the universes appear.
Yes.
From there he comes as Garbhodaksha and then Shirodaksha.
Yes. So Garbhodaksha actually manifests. You could say he does. Maybe actually they could be talking about Garbhodaksha Vishnu.
Yeah, Garbhodaksha.
But the one that he's talking about is the super soul that's with the living entity is Shirodaksha Vishnu. So Shirodaksha Vishnu is present within every atom, every little facet, and it's an expansion of the Lord. Actually, it's now he's talking about Vasudeva here, but it's an expansion from Krishna. But Krishna's not really; he's not interested in this activity so much. He's busy. He has a lot of lila to do, so he's busy doing that. But he expands a portion of himself to take care of universal maintenance and things. So Shirodaksha Vishnu is that expansion. And he comes within every single pore of material existence to assist the many living entities in their many desires and in the functioning of material creation. So actually it's explained here in, let me finish this. The fruit eater, the living entity, has forgotten his real identity and is overwhelmed in the fruitive activities of the material conditions. But the Lord, the Paramatma, is always full in transcendental knowledge. That is the difference between the super soul, which was what we just described, and the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul, the living entity, is controlled by the laws of nature, while the Paramatma, or the super soul, is the controller of the material energy. So there's always a paradigm that atheists would. I used to study kind of the atheist arguments. In popular atheism, Western atheism maybe. And so one of their arguments was like, why would God want to, yes, Piyush?
So just a reference, so the Western atheism are called atheist, and there's a school of thought in Indian atheism which is called Charvaka.
Yes.
Charvakas are the Indian way of atheistic.
Yes,
people, yeah.
yes, I've heard of this Charvaka. I'm not studied on it.
It's a
Charvaka Muni comes from Charvaka.
Charvaka is purely like the school of thoughts like Mayavadi and other school of thoughts are there, right? The Charvaka is a proper school of thought. It's a Vedic, not Vedic thought, but a proper school in which they study the logic behind atheism.
Yeah, it has
Very structured.
yes, it has like a kind of yeah, like you said there.
But it shows the development of Indian mentality that even the study of such rigorous atheistic approach was even possible.
Yes, yes.
And it was not condemned. It's like, okay, question it. Like,
Well, it is condemned by many.
It is condemned,
but-
I'm saying-
but
I'm
it
saying
is,
Give a chance to
at least give your points. Test it,
Sure,
vent
sure.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
There are
come to
many
argument,
schools of
yes.
thought. I mean, there's
Yes.
Vaisheshika, there's there's the 6 primary schools of thought.
So the Western way of thinking, oh, we are new to questioning God. No, it is always there. It's thousands of years old in India as well. That okay, we have done industrial and still found no significance in it, and still we are surviving this.
Yes,
So-
yes. This is this is very true.
Yeah.
But
So,
yes,
yeah.
but in the Western atheistic thought, that's what you could say trained in. One of the questions is like, well, why would God just sit up there and judge you the whole time? Why would He care, what you're doing? But there's like some fundamental errors to that type of thought. That one, thinking that God is spending all of His time, one, that He's also a limited being who can only focus on one thing at once. We can only do that. We can only focus on one thing at once. But God actually, He's well beyond that. He can accomplish so many tasks in one movement. They would say, well, God, why would God be sitting there worrying about what I'm doing as the living entity? But actually, it's explained here that He's always with you, accompanying you, actually providing you the opportunity to fulfill your desires. No matter how perverted they are, they will have consequences, no problem. You'll have to deal with that. But He's fulfilling all of it. Even all the evil actions and things like that. The Shiradaksha, the Super Soul, is giving the knowledge how people can perform all these actions. Yes, there will be consequences. But the more wicked actions one does, the more punishment by karma and by maya is there. And vice versa, the more material piety that happens, the more material enjoyment is given in facility. But ultimately, when we understand this system, we should realize, oh, let me turn to you. You're the one bestowing all of these fruits and everything. I mean, it said Vasudeva's the end goal of everything. Yoga, austerity, sacrifice, fruitive actions, no matter what you're doing. So like this, we're controlled by the laws of nature, while the Supreme Lord is the controller of the material energy. So we should approach the controller, and He's not at all bogged down by this. He has an expansion of Himself that's just supervising this whole thing. His duty is to actually supervise all of this, and this is, like we mentioned, the Shiradaksha Vishnu. But we're not interested in necessarily playing this game. And actually, He will, when you have the desire for enlightenment, for the desire to get out of this mess, He actually will also help you and give you the intelligence on how to do that as well. So He's actually, the Super Soul is guiding us through this right now, but now instead of further into the material ignorance, He's helping guide us out of it now. So that's one of the principles of Guru. We see Guru as an expansion from the Super Soul, an expansion from the Supreme Lord, that He's coming here to actually help guide you out. The Super Soul is fulfilling. You have a desire to get out of this material predicament, and here we go. The Super Soul has provided an arrangement now that a Guru has appeared. So we should pray that such a thing happens for us. So, next verse, 32. Yatha hyavahito vahnir
avahito vani
darushveka svayonishu
dharukashve ikashve yonishu
naneva bhati vishvatma
nane vabhati vishvatma
bhuteshu cha tatha puman.
bhuteshu cha tatha puman.
Yatha,
Yatha,
as much as he, exactly like avahita, surcharged with
surcharged with
vani,
vani,
fire,
fire,
darushu,
darushu,
in wood, Eka,
Eka,
one,
one,
Svayonishu,
Svayonishu,
the source of manifestation,
the source of manifestation,
Nanaiva,
Nanaiva,
like different entities,
like different entities,
Bhati,
Bhati,
illuminates,
illuminates,
Vishvatma,
Vishvatma,
the Lord is
the
Paramatma,
Lord is Paramatma,
Bhuteshu,
Bhuteshu,
in the living entities,
in the living entities,
Cha,
Cha,
and
Tatha,
Tatha, in the same way,
in the same way,
Puman,
Puman,
the absolute person,
the absolute person,
the Lord,
the Lord,
well, we don't have to repeat all this one, but the Lord is super soul, pervades all things, just as fire permeates wood, and so he appears to be of many varieties, though he is the absolute one without a second. So this is interesting, just as fire permeates wood. Purport: Lord Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by one of his plenary parts, expands himself all over the material world, and his existence can be perceived even within the atomic energy. Matter, antimatter, proton, neutron, etc. are all different effects of the Paramatma feature of the Lord. As from wood fire can be manifested, or as butter can be churned out of milk, so also the presence of the Lord as Paramatma can be felt by the process of legitimate hearing and chanting of the transcendental subjects, which are especially treated in the Vedic literatures, like the Upanishads and Vedanta. Remember, what is hearing and chanting? What two processes of bhakti?
Shravana,
Shravana and Kirtan. So this is how, but legitimately, sincerely, not like, all right, well, I'll hear a little bit, but let me look at my phone real quick. I'll hear a little bit, and I'll listen to some music, or I'll do my work, and I'll hear a little bit. We have to be very engaged in the hearing, very engaged. Also very engaged in the sharing as well. And we have to hear and become bona fide to share, which is not easy actually.
to share,
Yes, to share.
Because
Like for instance, if you're trying to share something,
be mindful and responsible for it.
yeah. Well, you also have to know it. You have to have heard, and you have to actually have
Understood it.
realized and understood it, and then you can actually share properly. So similarly, we need to find a person who's bona fide and who can actually share this knowledge with us. It's not easy, especially in everyday life. You go out in the world. Your professors at college won't teach you this. Your boss won't teach you this. Most of your friends won't teach you this. There's very few people who can give this knowledge. That's why we approach Shastras and we have the Vani of the Acharyas, the instructions of the Acharyas, because even, like, say for me, myself, I can only share what now I'm gleaning from them, but it's rare I get the opportunity to hear from like a very exalted soul. I mean, there's ways I can hear online. I can listen to Prabhupada. I can listen to exalted Vaishnavas, and I do. But at the same time, and we hear their instructions in the books, but at the same time, we should hope that we could also, if there's a chance for live hearing and chanting, we should run to that immediately. So like that. That's why we're going to invite a bunch of great personalities here and hope that they can give us all that opportunity. So we're in the process of actually, that's one of our projects for this week, is to set a schedule into the winter of all different personalities.
Like for next year?
Into next year, but
What's that
as
number?
soon as possible.
Yeah.
As soon as someone can get here, we'd like to host them and have them give people the opportunity to hear these things. But so the Paramatma can be felt by the process of legitimate hearing and chanting of the transcendental subjects, which are especially treated in the Vedic literatures like the Upanishads and Vedanta. Srimad Bhagavatam is the bona fide explanation of these Vedic literatures. The Lord can be realized through the oral reception of the transcendental message, and that is the only way to experience the transcendental subject. So oral, that's not necessarily reading, hearing, oral reception. We actually have to hear, and he's saying that's the only way to experience the transcendental subject. As fire is kindled from wood by another fire, the divine consciousness of man can be similarly be kindled by another divine grace. His divine grace, the spiritual master, can kindle the spiritual fire from the wood-like living entity by imparting proper spiritual messages injected through the receptive ear. Therefore, one is required to approach the proper spiritual master with receptive ears only, and thus divine existence is gradually realized. The difference between animality and humanity lies in this process only. A human being can hear properly, whereas an animal cannot. So this is what we were just mentioning, how important hearing is. Actually, it's the only way, it's Prabhupada, to experience the transcendental subject. The only way you're going to experience the Supersoul, the Supreme Lord, is through hearing of His message from His bona fide representative. You're not going to be able to figure it out with your own contaminated intelligence, no matter how much you read on your own. Now, well, you might say, I don't always have a chance to hear. So then the Shastra, the Bhagavat is there. We're serving the Bhagavats. Remember, this Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya has to go on. So, and in a sense, you're internally hearing. You're receptive to hearing this message of Bhagavatam. But at the same time, we should try and also hear from the person Bhagavat. We should try and serve. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, serve. So how do you serve? One, you serve by receptively hearing them, and then two, you serve, menial service. Can I get you a glass of water? Can I, what do you need done? Can I fold your clothes? Something like that. So, when you meet these type of personalities, you want to serve them in the best way you can. But a human being can hear properly, whereas an animal cannot. We have to get out of the animalistic tendencies. But this is our issue. We can't even sit and hear. Aso gunamayer bhaver.
Aso guna maye bharve.
Bhuta sukshmendriyatmabi.
Bhuta sukshmendriyatmani bhi.
Svanirmiteshu nirvishto.
Svanirmiteshu nirvishto.
Bhunkte bhuteshu tadgunan.
Bhukte bhuteshu tadgunaha.
Aso. That Paramatma. Gunamayai. Influenced by the modes of nature. Bhavai. Naturally. Bhuta. Created. Sukshma. Subtle. Indriya. Senses. Atmabi. By the living beings. Svanirmiteshu. In his own creation. Nirvishtaha. Entering. Bhunkte. Causes to enjoy. Bhuteshu. In the living entities. Tatgunan. Those modes of nature. Translation. The Supersoul enters into the bodies of the created beings who are influenced by the modes of material nature and causes them to enjoy the effects of these modes by the subtle mind. Actually, this is actually where enjoyment is. They even, I'll tell you a funny story after this purport. There are 8,400,000 species of living beings, beginning from the highest intellectual being, Brahma, down to the insignificant ant, and all of them are enjoying the material world according to the desires of the subtle mind and gross material body. The gross material body is based on the conditions of the subtle mind, and the senses are created according to the desire of the living being. The Lord as Paramatma helps the living being to get material happiness because the living being is helpless in all respects in obtaining what he desires. He proposes and the Lord disposes. In another sense, the living beings are parts and parcels of the Lord. They are therefore one with the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, the living beings in all varieties of bodies have been claimed by the Lord as his sons. The sufferings and enjoyments of the sons are indirectly the sufferings and enjoyments of the Father. Still, the Father is not in any way affected directly by the suffering and enjoyment of the sons. He is so kind that he constantly remains with the living being as Paramatma and always tries to convert the living being towards the real happiness. That's why the results of karma are there, to always give you the opportunity to realize, oh, this isn't worth it. That's why the results of karma are there, to always give you the opportunity to realize that what Prabhupada is saying, convert the living being towards the real happiness. You know, like for instance, if you, you know, and try to enjoy any material pleasure, you know, intoxication, sex life, things like this. In the moment, it seems like, yes, this is going to be so good. But then when it's all said and done and the consequences come out of it, you realize like, oh, that wasn't worth it. Almost every time. Almost every time you're like, I shouldn't have tried to indulge like this. Now, but if you're very much in the modes of ignorance, you just still keep pushing on. You still keep pushing on. But if you do somehow or other get a little bit of sattva coming into your life, a little bit of knowledge, you'll begin to realize these things. That yes, one, who am I? Who is the Lord? And that also the Lord is present with you in all activities. And He's actually disposing, He's the one giving all of them. Even your means of sense gratification. It's through the Lord He's that's happening. So, He's not affected directly by the suffering and enjoyment of us. But He's so kind, He constantly remains with the living being as Paramatma and tries to convert the living being towards real happiness. Also, we should understand what's causing us to enjoy the effects of these things. It's actually not, you know, so much the physical thing. Like, one thing it's like almost embarrassing to talk about, but one thing I studied in my earlier years of life, especially when I was quite atheistic and a sense enjoyer, was sex life. And yeah, a bit of that. But anyway, I studied sex life extensively, and not just through the Vedic way. There's pretty much all kinds of Western sciences on how to, you know, properly do sex life. I mean, it's the goal of life for most people, and for me at one point in my life, it was absolutely the goal of life. But ultimately, what the climax or the pinnacle of enjoyment of sex life, there's a word for that, but we don't necessarily need to talk about the word. But when you actually study it, and you know, I kid you not, a very dumb portion of my life, I literally studied from these experts on sex life, you know, at this time of my life. Look, now you're all very attentively here. This is the conditioned nature. Oh, as soon as actually that's why they do it in a lot of subtle advertising. They'll include something to do with sex because they know everyone will pay attention, like this. In like commercials and things like that, pretty girl, object of sex life, everyone's looking. Yes, Camel cigarettes? Sure, I'll smoke this thing. Like this. So anyway, so why not talk about sex life? Maybe people will pay attention. But actually, I studied this at one point in my life. And actually in you know, there's all kinds of different ways to make your own enjoyment and the other's enjoyment ultimately happen. But actually the way it was, it didn't have very much to do with the actual body at all. It had actually a lot to do with the mind. And actually when you read something like this, the modes of material nature causes them to enjoy the effects of these modes by the subtle mind. Actually, that is the very thing that's causing us enjoyment. It's not necessarily our interaction with the bodily senses, the physical sense of touch. It's the interaction of the mind with the senses. It's the interaction of the mind with the object of the senses. So this, if we know this thing and we understand, well, this is how the mind is enjoying, if we can purify the mind, which is what the chanting process is doing, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, cleansing the mirror of the mind, then actually our enjoyments will change. But over time, we have a lot of caking on there. It's quite dirty, you know. Like for instance, you say sex, everyone, we perk up that way. Mm-hmm. Why? Because we have a need for cleansing. We have the need for cleansing. But this is where the actual enjoyment is or the perceived enjoyment. It's in the mind. And as like it says in Bhagavad Gita, the mind is what? Either your best friend or what? Yes. But unfortunately, because we're not the transcendentally realized soul, it's our worst enemy. So if we can control the mind, which is also what mantra means, to free the mind, and if we take the Maha Mantra, the great mantra to liberate the mind, we have a chance. So it's time, we have to end. Devi, are you ready? We have to end. We literally only have one more verse in this chapter, but we'll start. We'll do it tomorrow. But yeah, thank you guys. I wish us all the understanding of what's happening in this material world, and to not get so bogged down with the interactions of the modes of nature, and to see the Lord pervading in all of it, and understand the Lord is guiding us through our desires. And then when we are intelligent, if we shift our consciousness towards understanding Him, and by serving Him in all our activities, will the ultimate results be bestowed. So I wish that upon you. I especially wish that upon me. And yeah, thank you guys for joining. And I'll